And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Scarlet Fu, taking you through to the closing bell, a global simulcast. It starts right now. Alix Steel off on assignment. Carol Massar has the day off. Emily Grafeo filling in for her. And, of course, Tim Stenovec joining us, as always, as we welcome our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, television, radio, and our partnership with you, too. Tim, a bit of a bifurcated trade here. Big gains in the NASDAQ on the day, but you're still seeing the Russell, the transports, and the mid-caps basically straddling in the line between gains and losses.
Yeah, and it's kind of like not really what we saw earlier in the session. We saw stocks were really doing nothing earlier. They got a little bit of a bounce just in the last couple of hours, and we've been hovering around this area. I don't know. Maybe they're thinking about investors are thinking about the economic data that we got today that we'll get later this week. Broadcom earnings after the bell later this week. Not too many catalysts in the near term, I think, that are kind of moving markets right now.
But if you're a cross-asset reporter, it was an exciting day across asset classes. You look at the move in long-term treasuries, oil moving higher, Bitcoin is lower, which you wouldn't expect that on a risk-on day. So under the hood, the cross-asset is interesting.
And don't forget the U.S. dollar near a 2-year low as well. I mean, this could all change later on this week if President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping end up having their conversation that we've been teased on for so many days now.
Yeah, I mean, what's that conversation going to look like, though? Because at this point, I'm so confused as to exactly what either country wants. I think I have a sense here of what President of the United States wants, but I'm not really clear how that dovetails with what the Chinese government, at least what they've communicated publicly. All right, we get the closing bells here in New York. Let's take a quick look here. With the Dow Jones Industrial Average relatively unchanged on the day, as it takes a while for these numbers to settle. Seeing EW Scripps actually ringing the bell there on the NASDAQ. And look at that, over at the NYSE grinder ringing the bell there in honor of the start of Pride Month here in the U.S. The S&P 500 higher by 24 points, or about 0.4%. The NASDAQ up about 0.7% on the day, and the Russell 2000 clinging to gains higher by 4 points, or 0.2%.
Kind of evenly split between gainers and decliners in the S&P 500. 241 stocks moved higher, 261 to the downside.
Yeah, you look at the sector performances, and there's a lot of green here on the IMAP. The only sector to finish in the red is industrials, losing about 0.25%. Healthcare and REITs were basically unchanged on the day, although they did tick into the green at the close, with the S&P 500 ending at its session highs. Energy, the best performer here, as crude oil, as Emily mentioned earlier, getting a big bid. And tech and communication services all gaining as well.
All right, let's take a look at some of the gainers on this day today. Applied Digital up more than 48%. It's a digital infrastructure company, i.e. cloud services for high-performance computing. Shares surged, and get this, it was only the biggest jump going back to September. This after the company entered into 2 lease agreements with CoreWeave in North Dakota. Remember, CoreWeave is the cloud services company. So under these agreements, Applied Digital will deliver 250 megawatts of critical IT load to host CoreWeave's AI and high-performance computing infrastructure at its North Dakota Center campus. Also, keep an eye on what happened with steel and aluminum stocks today. A host of these companies moved higher. I picked out in particular Steel Dynamics, higher by 10% today. This after President Trump said he would be increasing tariffs on steel and aluminum by 50% from 25%. The president did say on Friday that the move would help protect American workers. This was as he visited a U.S. steel plant late last week, I should say. The president also said he would raise aluminum rates in a post on Truth Social. That post said the new rates would become effective this coming Wednesday.
Why did you choose Steel Dynamics and not the others, Tim?
Steel Dynamics was the best performer when I looked in the S&P 500 on a percentage basis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so in the S&P 500.
There's a method to his madness.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a method. It was actually a hard decision. I, in fact, even looked at some steel ETFs if I wanted to do one of those.
Ooh. Yeah.
But it was only moving higher by like 2.5%, 3%. I thought this was a more dramatic move. So.
All right. Well, Cleveland Cliffs up 23% on the day.
That was the
best
one.
day since 2016.
But that's not in the S&P 500.
How's that for a superlative?
It's not in the S&P 500.
Oh my gosh.
And the market cap is only a fraction
of
what Steel Dynamics is. So yeah, there is a method to this madness.
He's got big cap bias.
Hey, there is a little merger action happening. M&A Monday, Blueprint Medicines Corporation, higher today, just surging 26%. Sanofi agreeing to buy the company for at least $9.1 billion. Sanofi's looking to further expand its rare immunological disease portfolio. The company plans to finance the transaction with a combination of cash on hand and proceeds from new debt.
All right, and looking at the decliners right now, DraftKings falling as much as 8.5%. but it actually ended the day down 6% after Illinois lawmakers proposed a sports betting tax increase in the fiscal 2026 budget. Flutter Entertainment was also lower, but the DraftKings drop perhaps more significant here. This was a surprise move from Illinois following last year's unexpected boost. According to analysts at Truist and Oppenheimer, they say that online sports betting operators will have to pay a 25-cent fine on the first 20 million wagers accepted, and then a 50-cent charge thereafter. I'm also looking at shares.
I just want to say, too, we caught up with David Katz at Jefferies, because I was kind of confused as to why the shares are reacting so much. And he said the bigger issue here was that if Illinois does this, then it gives sort of a green light for other states to follow suit, and that would be the real risk. That's his view, not mine.
Right, yeah. I feel like we typically see those fears of like a contagion effect when it comes to anything around sports betting proposals like this one. But now flipping back to Tesla, shares dropped as much as 3.8%, finished the day down 1%. A French industry association said today that Tesla sales plunged 67% to an almost 3-year low in France. And this is undercutting CEO Elon Musk's assertion last month that the car maker has recovered from its early year sales slump. And then finally, advertising agencies fell. Interpublic Group is one of them. The Wall Street Journal reported that Meta is planning to enable brands to fully create and also target ads using AI by the end of next year. And we saw this company, $8.4 billion market cap. It's an organization of ad agencies, finishing the day down 4.5%.
All right. Just real quickly, speaking of trade, we are getting some headlines here out of the border, Customs and Border Administration here in the United States saying that they have extended the pause on U.S. tariffs on some Chinese goods to August 31st. And of course, there's been a lot of chatter today about more high-level talks between the U.S. and China in resolving this trade dispute here. And of course, it's hard to keep track of exactly which goods and which tariffs this actually applies to. But the headline here is that it has extended the tariff pause on some Chinese goods until August 31st. Let's take a quick look at yields. They did finish up across the board and across the curve here by about 4 basis points, almost evenly. You're taking a look at that 2-year yield, still holding just below that 4% level, your 10-year yield at 4.4, and your 30-year yield right now at about 4.9.
Hey, one of the stories that caught our attention today has to do with everything that's happening at Newark Airport. I know a lot of people in the Northeast are focused on this.
Is there anything happening at Newark Airport?
There is. They actually finished a runway ahead of schedule.
Ahead of schedule?
I know. It's pretty wild. They finished a runway ahead of schedule, and now they're set to actually increase flights later this month. This follows the completion of construction at one of the busiest hub's runways. This, according to the FAA earlier today. The FAA also saying it's going to allow 34 hourly arrivals once it certifies the recently rebuilt runway. It's now limited to a maximum of 28 per hour under restrictions imposed by the FAA to reduce delays. That compares to the typical maximum capacity of roughly 38 landings each hour.
So this increased capacity, it's expected to alleviate congestion and delays at the airport. We'll have to hold them to this. It's interesting because even if the flights are going to increase, will the demand increase? The New York area has a number of different airports that consumers can typically choose from. So it's interesting.
What's your favorite airport, Emily?
What's my favorite?
Yeah.
LaGuardia. But obviously, I mean, you can't fly international, but I love LaGuardia.
Yeah, well, no one can.
Unless you want to go to Montreal. I think there's some nice Montreal flights from LaGuardia.
But you can't go to California, for instance, Tim.
Right.
When you want to go home, like that's not a possibility.
It's JFK or Newark. And I was a Newark person until a few weeks ago when I switched all my travel for the summer over to JFK because of the issues that Newark has faced. This is a huge issue for United Airlines, of course, which has one of its busiest hubs at Newark Airport.
Although it has that partnership now with JetBlue, so that does give it more of a, I guess, presence at JFK.
Not overnight, right?
Not overnight,
when they do get those slots at JFK and then JetBlue gets some spots at Newark. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so good. That's good. Things kind of returning to normal at Newark, and maybe the IPO market is returning to normal as well. One can hope. Circle Internet Group, as well as its shareholders, increasing the size and price of its IPO. So that, of course, signals perhaps strong demand for the stock. This is the stablecoin issuer. They're now offering 32 million shares between $27 to $28 a pop. That's according to a filing with the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. I mean, we've actually had a lot of IPO activity over the last couple of weeks, and I was actually curious when we were talking about, I can't remember if it was the Mountain or the eToro one, and someone was showing the data about the number of IPOs so far this year, at least through the month of May, higher than last year. over the same stretch of period, and the number of companies going public has been higher as well. You would kind of not think that given all the chaos.
Well, I think what's so interesting is there was this pullback right after the so-called Liberation Day and when markets were in chaos and leading into that. And then as we've seen this steady drumbeat higher, more than 20% from those lows on April 8th, we've seen some of those companies dip back into the markets, and we've seen a stability come back, and we'll see what happens throughout the summer. But it does look like at least some big news coming from when it comes to those tariffs on some Chinese goods coming into the U.S. We'll get more details on that headline on both of our programs.